In the 20 years following 1950, the population of West Syracuse suburb Camillus nearly quadrupled. Kevin Donahue has grown up watching moving trucks on Ivy Lane, and this autumn day is no different. He welcomes the new kid on the block, part of a family moving from Binghamton, with 2.5 feet of wood strung together with old shoelaces. You're in Syracuse now. You play lacrosse. Play they did in the backyard on goals fashioned together with old piping, a place absent of fans, scouts, coaches, contracts, agents, and all of the bright lights we associate with modern sports. It's here the game is in its purest form, as the creator intended so long ago on the wide plains and forests that once made up this land, in a time long before the industry or idea of sport ever mattered. The creator's one demand for and from lacrosse remains now what it was back then: love. John Desko had acres of love to give. That love always coursed through his veins. In those backyard games at 114 Ivy Lane, during his first organized practice at West Genesee Junior High under a then unknown Mike Masser, while he ran midfield up and down the fields behind the high school, playing as always with his buddies Donahue, Billy Udovich, and Tim O'Hara. And when Roy Simmons Jr. offered him and the gang the chance to remake a broken team 7.5 miles away. For the next 45 years of his life and counting, John Desko never ran out of love for Syracuse, and he never ran out of love for lacrosse. Desko and the rest of that 1976 freshman class changed the course of the program. Despite having to spend road trips cramped in players' vans while eating fast food as a treat from Simmons, Desko's Frosh teams pieced together Syracuse's first 2 winning seasons since 1971. To counter SU's lineup being offense-heavy, Desko switched from midfield to close defense ahead of the 78 season. And in his final year, he made an All-American team at a position he wasn't recruited to play, with the class of 76 bowing out in Cuse's first ever NCAA tournament game. After the Orange defeated Princeton in 76 to move to 2-0 for just the second time that decade, most of the players celebrated the newfound success wildly, much to Desko's dismay. Those who saw John play always described an extra intangible aspect of his game, and walking off the field in New Jersey, he put that quality on full display, vowing to once again make winning an event so regular at Syracuse it would become wholly unremarkable. Regardless of whether Simmons had heard of that promise, he had his own plans for the blonde-haired 2-time captain. This love story wouldn't be left at the airport, and it wasn't ending anytime soon. It was a match made in heaven. The calm, introspective Simmons needed a disciplinarian on his staff, and Desko was more than happy to oblige. If you were to meet him, you'd only see a soft, understated authenticity, but the moment he enters coach mode, a different side of John Desko emerges, revealing a white-hot intensity, passion, and fire. His outbursts are the stuff of a legend, and coming from the school of Masser, discipline was mandatory from day one, even for members of the original crew. O'Hara found out first. In 1980, SU's all-time leading point getter whined to the new assistant on a particularly bad day. Half an hour of running later, he spoke to him again. "John, I'm your roommate, and I'm the coach." That was that. Not even Desko's younger brothers could escape his wrath, which was often warranted. Desko had been there for everything. On the sidelines with the Miracle 83 group in New Jersey, drawing up game plans for the first triumvirate's reign over the sport. And in '92, berating Roy Colsey for a behind-the-back pass to the point where Colsey refused to play in the national championship. Simmons said nothing, put his arm around his star, and led him back out to the field. By the mid-90s, it was clear within the program that Desko's spot under Simmons resembled an apprenticeship. It wasn't as though John was earning a lot, and other schools had come calling to offer him the chance to run his own program. Desko just had too much love, for lacrosse and for Syracuse. In 1995, though, for a very brief moment, the future would arrive for John Desko. So too would it arrive for what was quickly becoming SU's version of the Roman Eagle. For much of the first millennium BCE, Mediterranean trade ran through the North African metropolis of Carthage, the only power that went toe-to-toe with the rising Roman Republic. That Carthage is a far cry from the one Kirk Ventiquatro knows. The Carthage he grew up in, as legend has it, was settled by the descendants of the original. Anyone who has been to a rural town of its size knows that they can feel like their own galaxy, regardless of what part of the country they're in. Kirk grew up dwelling on what lay beyond the village along the Black River, and he had the chance to go out there and walk onto Pitt's football team, but he turned it down. Today, Kirk is Coach 2-4, a translation of his last name. He's organizing one of the many games of kickball that make up his 5th grade PE class. As always, he's commentating, creating an energy that makes every at-bat feel like 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th. Whatever sport the kids are playing that day, whatever stage they are taking, Coach is making it the world's stage. Kirk Ventiquatro stayed because, as he puts it, he doesn't want anyone from Carthage to feel like nobody from nowhere. He's a hero to these kids, and one fateful day brings in a stick used for a game he learned as a student at SUNY Cortland, a game called lacrosse. For 2 of his students in particular, there's no going back. The brothers can't stop talking about lacrosse at the dinner table, night after night after night. Larry Powell knows what he needs to do. He sells an old hunting shotgun, gets in his car, and drives west. I'd like to think he takes the road that goes by Fort Drum, which is in the middle of a $1.3 billion investment and will come to dominate this region. Larry gets to Waterton and stops at Klein's All Sports. Over time, Carthage will evolve into a place people come and go from more. Right now, though, there are very few tickets out of town. Larry probably has no idea he walks out of Klein's that day with some for his boys. The Powell brothers are hooked on lacrosse. They play in the backyard every day, without fail, on the goal they share with the neighbors. It's their lab, their escape, their way of life, a product of Carthage's nature. Those who put it nicely will say the distractions were limited. Those who don't, well... One day, Ventiquatro takes the boys and some other kids down the highway to their first ever Syracuse game. For the brothers, it's stepping into an entirely different universe. There's Simmons, who at this point has flowing white hair that makes him look like a wizard to a middle schooler. There's those iconic mesh cutoff jerseys, and of course there's the legendary players rocking them. As fate has it, it's the 1988 semifinal between Syracuse and Penn, and the boys witness the air gate live. In this moment, watching the fans try to process Gary Gates' magic, the oldest brother decides his future. He will follow Gary. He will bring the Dome to its feet again. Suddenly, the sanctuary of the backyard has a worthy stage. It's no longer the humble mill town. The bright lights of the Dome shine down upon it. He is Gary Gate. He wears 22. The fans go wild, over and over again. every behind the back and corner snipe the deciding goal. Somewhere along the way, it begins to dawn on the Powells that something extraordinary is happening. At an organized box league in Waterton, a longtime coach walks up to Larry and Sue unprompted and tells them both of their children will be All-Americans. Ventiquatro establishes Carthage's high school lacrosse program, and within a few years, coaches from programs as mighty as Maryland trek to this tiny village along the Black River to see the elder brother. Junior doesn't even need to go that far, as Cuse rents its practice field, one of the first in the area made of synthetic turf, to Carthage. This comet comes to him, and no doubt as he watches it shine from his office window, he knows the lineage is safe. So it will be. Gate, Lockwood, Powell. Incredibly, thanks to the work of YouTube channel Old School CCS, which has archived full high school lacrosse games from the mid-90s in a town of 4,000 people, we can watch what Roy saw from his office: Casey Powell in a Carthage Comet uniform. Memorial Day, 1994. Carthage Lacrosse, which has existed for 5 years, is playing for its first Section 3 title, essentially the Central New York Championship. Carthage has just gotten possession off of an errant shot, and Ventiquatro sends his star attack all the way down to the other end of the field to clear it. This doesn't normally happen, but most coaches don't possess 1994 Casey Powell. Obviously, Casey is a better athlete than anyone on this field, but it still isn't the first aspect of his game that comes to the forefront. Rather, it's how he makes it look so effortless. The countless hours in the backyard had refined Casey's stick skills to a ridiculous level, and as an added dimension, he's almost completely ambidextrous. As a defender, you have to play him straight up. You can't give him a step around the crease where he's pretty much automatic with his hands free. Your defense can't send help because he'll find the player you help off of. That's a tough assignment for an All-American defenseman, let alone the teenagers who got it. When the Carthage Comet walked off the field for the last time in his high school career, he did so having scored 553 points, shattering the New York State record. There isn't much information about his career available outside that lone number, but in his 1994 senior season, Casey scored 92 goals and racked up 77 assists in 23 games, an average of 4 and 3.3 per contest respectively. Or, using 12-minute quarters, Casey got on the score sheet at a rate of about once every 6.5 minutes. In video games, where you are able to play as a future superstar against ordinary high schoolers, it's not hard to put up comically ridiculous stat lines even when your player's overall ability is low by professional standards. I used to think that was unrealistic. I no longer do. On top of all of that, Casey was hell-bent on making as much of an impact as possible right out of the gate. He spent the summer of '94 in Toronto playing box to toughen up and refine his skills even further, and showed up to fall ball in peak physical condition. The very moment opposing defenses thought they could breathe, another game breaker had arrived to Dawn 22. For a team tasked with replacing 91 points of midfield production, Casey's adaptability was crucial, as was the play of Colsey, the only team captain on the offensive side and undoubtedly one of the 3 best midfielders in college. The duo quickly showed out, with Powell putting up 7 points in his Dome debut and Colsey recording 5 in the Final Four rematch against Virginia. However, the rest of the offense could only muster 2 more scores, and UVA became just the 5th school to ever walk out of the Dome victorious, while snapping a 23-game home win streak. Then, before the following game against Hopkins, a bout of double pneumonia temporarily hospitalized Junior, forcing him to miss the first game of his 35-year coaching career. Guess that means you're up, John. This isn't how you wanted it to happen, and I know you didn't have much time to prepare, but the players who have just learned Roy isn't coaching are understandably frazzled. You've got to nail this pregame speech. It was, exactly, 4 words long. As always happened with these 2 programs, the contest remained close right to the end, where a Hopkins equalizer with 8 seconds left and subsequent overtime winner handed the Orange their first losing streak in 13 years. The following day, the players gathered at Coyne Field, only to see Simmons had checked himself out of the hospital and braced for heavy running. Rather, Junior reassured his team. Even though some had already written them off, nobody would remember the slow start when Cuse had won out the rest of the way. The play of the Orange defenders would define the 1995 season, starting with the one and only Rick Beardsley. September 1992. Rick Beardsley is driving down I-81 somewhere near Cortland when he exits, pulls off, and takes a second to reflect on the events of the day. The 2-time high school All-American had told Simmons he hated it at Syracuse and was quitting less than a month into his time on campus. But whatever spark initially ignited that decision has faded now. Beardsley is someone who is renowned as much by his ability as his reputation for being unpleasant. Plenty have placed him into a box based on those 2 attributes, but if he truly fit there, he'd never have stopped and turned around the way he did that evening. Most never saw his upbringing in Yorktown, to a mother who at one point ran with gangs in New Rochelle, and a father who lived on a couch before his 18th birthday. Few could ever understand the grief he processed from losing his mother at 14. Nobody knew his relentless aggression and legendary trash talk came from genuine fear of failure and embarrassment. Rick Beardsley is a man of dichotomies. He caused enough headaches to drive away almost every coach in the country, yet possessed the introspection to understand that and explain it as the reason he went back to Simmons. He had an uncanny ability to keep his composure and concentration, even when verbally accosting his assignment, going at attackers' mental fortitude in the same style of a hockey enforcer or shutdown cornerback, and earning him the nickname Bam Bam, among others. And yet, a young Beardsley obsessed over developing his stick handling after watching goalie Billy Pilot do a stick demo at a camp and realizing position was no excuse for proper skill. The epitome of focused brutality on defense, could maneuver through transitioning rides with ease and sting corners from deep as soon as he got the ball. Later in that 1992 season, while playing Loyola, Beardsley faked a pass and rifled home one of 5 goals he'd scored that season, then turned to the Loyola sideline and flipped off head coach Dave Caudle while yelling, "Don't you wish you recruited me harder?" This would earn Rick the honor of a Coach Desko shouting session for running his mouth, while being informed he was named an honorable mention All-American. That was the deal. As many headaches as Beardsley had a reputation for causing, he backed everything up on the field. Rick's sophomore year brought a second-team All-American selection, and he caused the turnover in the '93 title game that would lead to Matt Ryder's championship-winning goal. In '94, his play earned a first-team nod, an honor he would go on to receive again the following year. With Beardsley flanked by fellow top recruit and skilled offensive defender Chad Smith, and a third All-American in Hans Schmid, Syracuse's defense wreaked havoc the rest of the way, forcing turnovers at will and almost immediately taking off on the fast break. Unsettled defenses had to choose between giving Beardsley and Smith open looks or helping and leaving Casey and sophomore Rob Kavovit alone, which almost always ended poorly for opposing goalies. The underclass duo paced Cuse's scoring in combining for 130 points over the course of the season, and as a result, were named to their first All-American teams, with the Orange winning out the rest of the regular season. In the quarterfinal against Princeton, Beardsley scored twice and casually launched a 70-yard behind-the-back pass upfield, which Kavovit controlled and found Casey with for a fourth goal in Powell's postseason debut. Casey and Kavovit recorded hat tricks again in the Final Four rematch with UVA, as SU exacted revenge via a fifth 20-goal outing in 8 games. In the title game, Beardsley, Smith, and Schmid held the Maryland offense to just 4 goals in the first half and 9 in total, and Kavovit put up a 7-pointer to fulfill Junior's prediction in March and claim Syracuse's 6th national championship. Rick Beardsley left Syracuse as a 2-time champion and just the 7th 4-time All-American in program history. As of 2022, he remains one of just 2 4-time All-American defensemen in Cuse history, along with Pat McCabe, the under-heralded anchor that marshaled the gate defenses. He's as deserving of his place in the Pantheon as any offensive player. Roy Colsey, the final member of the second triumvirate, left Syracuse as the 8th 4-time All-American in program history, and with bragging rights over the others as a 2-time champion. He also followed Dom Finn in winning the McLaughlin Award as the midfielder of the year in college lacrosse. Incredibly, a Syracuse player would claim this award for the 3rd straight season in 1996. Yep. With Colsey gone, Simmons asked Powell if he could temporarily shift up to midfield for the year to better balance the offense. Casey obliged, nearly put up 60 points anyways, and shared the McLaughlin with North Carolina's Jason Wade. This was his show now. All of the attention the Orange got, from fans, from the media, and from opposing defenses, was soaked up by 22. That was the way Rob Kavovit liked it. He was always at his best between the lines. 1991. Yorktown and Lakeland, the biggest rival high schools in Yorktown, are competing for the annual Murphy Cup. Rick Beardsley, Lakeland's biggest star and the best defender in the nation, clears the ball up the sideline while being chased by Yorktown sophomore Rob Kavovit. This camera angle doesn't do justice to the size mismatch here. Syracuse has Kavovit officially listed at 5 feet 9 inches and 165 pounds, but that's at minimum 3 years from now. Rick's not exactly a hoss at 5'11 and 200 pounds, but nonetheless challenges the little boy chasing him. Before he crosses midfield, Kavovit throws a check so ferocious it gets Rick Beardsley to turn around, do a double take, and decide to keep his mouth shut. Rob Kavovit was not going to let his size define him. He won 3 state championships and remains 3rd on Yorktown's all-time points leaderboard, behind only Tim and Tom Nelson. In 1994, he played in every game and led Syracuse in assists as a freshman. While Beardsley, Colsey, and Casey took the headlines in '95, Kavovit led the charge in May, racking up 11 points in the first 2 games of the tournament and contributing to 7 of Cuse's 13 goals in the national championship. Had Maryland goalie Brian Doherty not been named the tournament's most outstanding player, it would have been Cavo, who as a sophomore became just the 3rd Orange to post 18 or more points in a single tournament, after 1990 Gary Gait and Tom Maricek. In '96, Kavovit put to bed the notion he was just a provider by scoring 13 more goals, and with 70 points, he became the only Syracuse player to outscore Casey during his time on the Hill. Despite that individual brilliance, there just wasn't enough help around the duo. In the Final Four matchup with top-seeded Princeton, Powell and Kavovit combined to score 7 and assist 2, and that was all the production SU got, bowing out to the eventual champions 11-9. Unlike Syracuse's other sports, the lacrosse program had competed as an independent rather than in a conference, which made traditional rivalries hard to come by. Hopkins was, and still to many is, the obvious choice, but in the '90s, 2 more antagonists entered the stage. Princeton, who had matched up with Syracuse in the postseason in all but 1 year following that 1992 title game, was obvious now. The second had been brewing for years in the mid-90s, waiting for the perfect moment to spark. Long Island native Dom Starja had never played a lacrosse game before arriving at Brown in the '70s, but in a Roy Senior-esque narrative arc, turned into an All-American and the program's 2nd winningest coach. Starja's success eventually caught the attention of Virginia, who in 1993 tasked him with ending a 21-year championship drought. Prior to his arrival, the Cavaliers had only faced Cuse once in the NCAA era, a 1986 Final Four contest, but in Starja's 2nd season, the 2 sides squared off again in the same situation. Despite facing the 2nd triumvirate at the peak of its powers and multiple 5-goal deficits, Starja's group made a statement, scoring the opening 6 goals of the 4th quarter to flip the game on its head before burying Cuse in overtime. Then, of course, Starja's group walked into the Dome in '95 and claimed their first victory there in what would become a constant regular season matchup. Even though the Orange exacted revenge in the postseason, Virginia took the opening game of 1996 down in Charlottesville, the first of 3 consecutive Cuse UVA season openers. Which brings us to February 28th, 1997. Even in the build-up to opening face-off, the higher powers of the sport made clear the significance of this contest. 10,000 fans packed into the Dome to open the season on a Friday night. The starting lineups, a who's who of college lacrosse's biggest names, called viewers to heed the message written on the back of UVA's warm-up shirts. Buckle up. For the Orange, Casey dropped back down to his natural attack position, promising an even closer connection to Kavovit than the 129 points they split in 1996. Starja also brought an attacking duo that struck an equally potent fear into defenders' hearts. Michael Watson and Doug Knight set college lacrosse ablaze in 1996, combining to score 105 goals and averaging over 10 points a game. While Casey produced from the midfield, Watson and Knight made themselves college lacrosse's premier offensive force and dared 22 and 15 to take that moniker from them. For your safety, please keep your seatbelt fastened for the entire duration of the ride. Virginia wins the opening faceoff and strikes first, as Knight loses his defender and buries the pass from the third UVA attack, Drew McKnight. On SU's first possession, a rare 5-on-5 situation, Casey slides the needle to Doug Jackson on the crease. 2 minutes later, 22 snags a loose ball in transition and scores his first goal of the evening, then finds himself wide open on the crease to double it. Watson gets his night going with a skip pass to Drew Melchioni. Casey matches him on the other end. Watson knives through 4 orange defenders to score his first goal. Syracuse goes man up. Casey dissects the defense perfectly, and future Midi of the Year Jay Jalbert scores his first collegiate goal right off the next faceoff. Following another orange answer, Knight catches the defense slipping in transition and perfectly positions himself on the end of a Watson dime to tie it up and secure a first quarter hat trick. Watson and Knight contributed to all of the Cavs' 6 goals in the quarter. Syracuse's duo matches it when Casey draws a slide and sends Jackson through again for his 6th point of the quarter. In the first 15 minutes of this game, the two teams scored 13 goals, putting them on pace for a ludicrous 53 in the game. There's no way they can keep this up. A minute into quarter number 2, Jalbert scores. 2 minutes in, Watson finds Knight again. UVA scores another goal 46 seconds after that. Kavovit finally opens his tally just over a minute later, and Paul Carcaterra ties it up at 9-9 with the 5th goal in 5 minutes to open the second frame. The two sides are currently scoring nearly .93 goals per minute. Both teams are starting to run out of gas, though. After UVA doubles its lead, the two sides go nearly 7 minutes without scoring. Naturally, Jalbert, Kavovit, and McKnight score 3 times in the final minute and 6 seconds of the half. The Orange start quarter 3 with a goal, but quickly face-off dominance helps Virginia score 4 times in 2 minutes to push the lead to 6. Casey finally returns to the score sheet after almost 21 minutes, but 2 more Watson dimes quickly push Virginia's lead to 7 with just over 6 minutes left in the quarter. This one is slipping away. Watson and Knight are up to 12 points. SU's duo, which only has 3 since the first quarter, needs to take over. Casey snags and scores a rebound, and after SU stuffs a UVA man up, Kavovit breaks free to score short-handed. A third goal just before the end of the quarter puts the Orange right within striking distance. Watson starts the fourth by springing McKnight free, but the Virginia attackman hits the crossbar, and the ball rolls perfectly into the path of 22. The Dome is waiting for a spark. The game is there for the taking. This is the moment Casey Powell has waited for.
Sweeping shot, got nothing but iron. And Casey Powell double team, trying to get through traffic, he does. On the right wing, with a streak of speed, Powell comes on in, fans on their feet, score! Oh my goodness, what a move by the Carthage Comets! He scores to make it a 3-goal game! How do you like that, Casey Powell? Wow!
It appears to stunned onlookers as though Powell just flings a prayer behind his back with 2 defenders all over him. But it's clear on the replay that the ball spins just perfectly into the side netting after bouncing. The air gate, the play that inspired Casey down this path, stands alone by virtue of its unprecedented nature. But in my opinion, from a perspective of technical difficulty, this one has it and everything else beat. There's still work to be done though. Drawing a one-on-one with first-team All-American Tommy Smith, Casey drops him to the turf and slides a shovel pass through to a wide-open Kavovit. Minutes later, Cavo gets the ball in the same position and gets decked, but still scores his 5th. Goalie Jason Gebhardt denies the Cavaliers and sends the ball up to Powell, who stings his 6th goal of the game to go with 5 assists. At 11 points, he sits just one shy of Gary's record from 1988. Knight stops the bleeding for UVA with an assist and a goal on the next 2 Who's possessions. Powell scoops a ground ball off the next faceoff and drops another dime to 15 on the crease to tie the Syracuse record with his 12th point. Jalbert gets called for a push, and Doug Jackson knots things up at 21 with 5.5 left in the game. Neither side finds the edge as the clock winds down, and off of a timeout, Simmons puts the ball in 22 stick. 1-on-1 with under 3 minutes left in a tie game and 1 point shy of breaking SU's single game points record. You couldn't have scripted a better stage.
Powell on the left side controls. Thought about a sharp angle shot. Onto it. Powell speed shoots. Score! He has done it again! Can you believe number 22? Goal number 7 on the game.
Casey's 13th point of the night wound up being the winner, 22-21. As of the conclusion of the 2022 season, Syracuse men's lacrosse has played 1,313 lacrosse games. In that history, the 1997 contest with Virginia possesses 2 completely singular accomplishments. These 2 teams scored a goal on average every 84 seconds for 60 minutes. They scored 43 times at a rate of just over 0.7 goals per minute. Virginia would reach the 20 mark 4 more times this season. In those games, their average margin of victory was over 21 goals. They scored 21 and still lost in the Dome. This remains the only game in the history of either program where both teams surpassed the 20 barrier. Then, Casey Powell. Watson and Knight were as advertised, and Powell just about matched the duo on his own, becoming the 18th man in NCAA history with 13 or more points in a single game. SU's single game records for both goals and assists feature multiple players tied at the top, but this effort remains unmatched by any other Orange in any other game. Statistically speaking, Casey's performance against Virginia is the greatest individual effort in Syracuse lacrosse history. As his teammates swarm him, the Superman theme plays across the Dome, a serenading crowd echoing with a rousing ovation. Cuse is only the first stop on Casey's line across the sports universe, but for now, the superhero with the mark on his chest, known far and wide, flings his stick skywards and celebrates on the field of his dreams. Forget even the 1995 national championship. Casey lived this moment, year after year, shot after shot in that Carthage backyard, through countless imaginary games won in the Dome. The real thing is everything that boy dreamed it could be. In 1997, Casey became the first Orange to break the 80-point barrier since 1988 Gary Gait, good enough to win his first Player of the Year award. Kavovit trailed him by just 6 points. As of 2022, no other duo in SU history, not Nelson and Kotz, not the Gates, not Marachek and Zolberti, has recorded a season where both players put up at least 77 points. Kavovit was the perfect Robin to Casey's Batman. He scored 4 in the quarterfinals against a Loyola team determined to take away Casey's scoring, as Powell became the first Orange not named Tim Nelson with 8 assists in a game. In the Final Four matchup against 7-seed Maryland, Kavovit notched 8 points, Casey tallied 7, and Cuse put up 17. But without any defensive All-Americans, the Orange let Maryland score 18 to render it all moot. Rob Kavovit walked off the field that day with 246 career points, at the time 7th in Syracuse history and just 7 behind Gary Gait. His 51 career postseason points, 6 more than Casey, made him the 3rd Orange to ever break the 50 barrier, along with Gary and Tom Marachek. I hope in that moment he could take immense pride in the weight those accomplishments carry. On March 16th, 2021, Rob Kavovit took his own life. He was 45 years old. He didn't leave a note. As a senior, Casey Powell claimed his 2nd National Player of the Year trophy to go with the Turnbull Award for the nation's top attackman, remaining the only winner of both the Midfielder of the Year and Attackman of the Year awards. He became the 3rd Syracuse player with 9 goals in a game against Towson. The team's shortcomings in '96 and '97 meant he'd never get to the Gates' 3 national titles, but coming off that 83-point year in '97, he entered the tournament just 4 points shy of Tim O'Hara for the all-time Syracuse record. The makings of a young defense took shape too, through Michigan State transfer Kevin Sheedy and Onondaga Marshall Abrams, who earned an honorable mention All-American nod as a freshman. But Cuse was only reaching the mountaintop off the back of 22. Virginia puts that defense to the sword early in Cuse's quarterfinal matchup, but on a night where Ken Malloy is honored for his service to lacrosse at halftime, Casey passes Tim O'Hara in another 7-point effort, and the dream stays alive. Only the back-to-back national champion Princeton Tigers await them in the Final Four. Bill Tierney essentially makes the game plan to get the ball out of Casey's hands whenever he gets it, but Cuse holds a steady lead through much of the 3rd quarter. And yet, in the 4th, so often clutch time for so many years, the offense completely sputters, scoring 38 seconds in and watching the rest of the way as Princeton methodically whittles the advantage away, takes the lead with 5 to go, and holds possession to run down the clock. Casey nearly scores an all-time goal to tie it with a minute left, but the shot is saved, and midnight strikes on his Syracuse career. Roy Simmons Jr. has been coaching for 27 years now. He has seen every notion of his school, team, and sport transform beyond his wildest beliefs. The man who had thought he would be more renowned for his art than his lacrosse exploits now has 6 national titles to his name, more than anyone in D1 history. Junior takes a moment to reflect as he gathers his team. December 21st, 1988. Pan Am Flight 103 is making its journey from London to New York, carrying, among others, 35 SU study abroad students making their way home for Christmas. The quaint serenity of the night is violently interrupted. Libyan terrorists had planted a bomb on the plane. When it goes off, it kills everyone on board, and parts of the plane crash into the town of Lockerbie, Scotland. In total, 270 people lose their lives in what remains the deadliest terror attack in the United Kingdom's history. At a memorial service held in the Dome, as Roy Simmons Jr. watches the grieving families, he vows he will visit Lockerbie. Months later, after triumphing in the legendary '89 title game, Jr. follows through. Simmons and the entire team, most of whom had never left the continent, raised the money to visit the recovering Scottish town. For days, they travel to various sites of remembrance and hold camps to teach the game to the children of the town, who probably had no idea the lacrosse equivalent of the Showtime Lakers had landed on their shores. 9 months later, Simmons gets word the visit hooked so many locals on lacrosse, it created a desperate shortage of equipment. In the end, he'd visit Scotland 3 more times, and 8 years after the 1989 trip, the Scottish national team competed in the World Games for the very first time. As the 1998 team huddles by their leader one last time, Junior tells them something he's known all year. His 27th season as Syracuse's head coach is his last. The traditional retrospective for Roy Simmons Jr. brings upon a flood of numbers and achievements. 290 wins, 96 losses, 6 national championships, 16 straight Final Four appearances to end his career, 130 All-Americans. I don't know about you, but that perspective just doesn't fit the Junior I've seen. Even without those accolades, when the world thought he was only in charge because of his last name, toiling with the broken wreckage of his father's legacy, Simmons saw all of this in a much deeper way. Just ask his players. They'll tell you how they couldn't understand then why he'd always stop on road trips at museums and Broadway plays, and they'll tell you now how much it opened their view of the world around them. They'll tell you how someone with passions seen as separately as sport and art could blend the two into something wholly natural. They'll tell you how what Junior calls his lack of ego freed the Nelsons, Gates, and Powells of the world to imagine and paint their masterpieces on the canvas of the Dome turf. While many of Roy's players break down in tears upon hearing the news, some take the initiative and lift him onto their shoulders. Bill Tierney will go on to win his 3rd consecutive title this season. He'll eventually become the only man to ever win more than Junior. But right now, the crowd of 20,000 is saluting Simmons on the site of his final defeat. The scoreboard has no value. The championship trophy is just a hunk of wood and metal. The only currency taken here is unconditional love, and with Junior, there's always plenty to go around. Lacrosse is a game that breathes life. From the very beginning, that life poured into every crevice of Roy's soul. And yet, it always felt as though he could have walked away without hesitation. Neither the game nor the life it gave Junior consumed him. For whatever he didn't need, he simply breathed out into those around him. It could be slipping players a few bucks from his pocket for a treat at fast food places on road trips. It could be driving random teenagers to Ottawa to help out the coach of his country's main rivals. It could be taking one of the greatest teams of all time and holding bake sales and car washes to give back to reeling people on the other side of the ocean. One of SU's players in the 70s, after encouragement from Simmons, took a semester to study abroad in Spain. He loved it so much, Junior never saw him again, and Roy's probably the only coach who would mark that down as a win. On February 20th, 2022, Roy Simmons Jr. became the 6th person entered into the Syracuse Ring of Honor, the 2nd representative of the lacrosse program after Jim Brown. The head coaching position is named in his honor. All the roads that define Syracuse lacrosse come back to him. Only the Haudenosaunee can truly understand the spiritual significance of what they call the medicine game. But as far as the rest of us go, Roy Simmons Jr. has come the closest. Syracuse's decision as to who would succeed Simmons took about this long to make. The announcement wouldn't come until the conclusion of an official search, but much like when Junior took over from Senior 27 years prior, the choice was beyond obvious. By this point, Desko had been Roy's associate for nearly 2 decades and had turned down other schools to one day take over on the Hill. Simmons made sure every single person in the athletic department knew that too. Of course, Desko's wealth of experience almost completely mitigated concerns about the transition. Similarly, an obvious prince would take Casey's place on the famed throne of 22. Whenever Casey played the role of Gary Gate, Ryan Powell donned Paul's 19. Outside of Paul, Ryan probably has more experience in growing up with a Hall of Fame caliber sibling than anyone. It's no insult to say Ryan wasn't quite as talented as Casey, one of the most naturally skilled lacrosse players of all time. To vent a quattro, though, the younger Powell made up the talent gap through sheer willpower, hence his nickname, Rhino. Still, even as Ryan scored 429 career points at Carthage, local papers only referred to him as Casey's brother. It's worth pointing out that, like any pair of brothers, these two are relentlessly competitive. They'll get into fights playing pickup basketball. They'll get into fights playing video games. They'll get into fights in the dugout of a Little League contest. Like any younger sibling, Ryan does not want to only be known as Casey's brother. In the end, Ryan wound up committing to follow the elder Powell's path at Syracuse, fully understanding he'd spend 2 more years in Casey's massive shadow. He slotted into the midfield to get playing time as a freshman, started every game, and thrived enough to earn an honorable mention All-American selection. As Casey led the nation in scoring in '98, Ryan stepped into Kabovit's 77-point shoes and finished second in the nation in scoring with 73. Before the contest against UMass, the PA announcer sent the nation's best scoring duo out together, a decade after he did the same for Paul and Gary. It really was the Gates all over again. Now, the mighty 22 called for the younger Powell. For 2 years, Ryan would call the shots. For 2 years, Ryan would be the center of attention. He certainly didn't waste the spotlight. In his first full season with 22, Rhino scored 39 and assisted 46 to reach a single-season point tally Casey never climbed to. Despite that, Desko's first regular season in charge was nothing if not tumultuous, as 3 underclassmen were kicked off the team for breaking into Manley Fieldhouse, and the Orange suffered close losses to Hopkins, Loyola, Princeton, and Georgetown. It was the first time they had dropped 4 regular season games since '82, the last time they missed the tournament. In '99, they'd suffer no such fate, squeaking in as the 8th and final seeded team. By this point, Tournament expansion meant the Orange would need to pass through 3 opponents just to get to the title game, but that's exactly what they did, sneaking by Princeton in the first round before upsetting top-seeded Loyola off the back of 7 assists from Ryan. In a rare 8 versus 5 Final Four matchup, Cuse took down Georgetown at the cost of a back injury to Powell that likely hindered him in the title game. Cuse stormed back in the fourth to cut the lead to 1, but Starja and UVA held on for their first national championship in 27 years. As the millennium turned to 2000, SU's next core broke out. Marshall Abrams comes from a lineage of Iroquois Nationals defensemen. Growing up playing both box with the Haudenosaunee and long stick midi in the field, Abrams continued SU's tradition of skilled pulls by moving to close defense as a sophomore and putting up 14 points over the next 2 years. While Powell ran the show on offense, Abrams captained the defense to the other Orange first-team All-American nod in 2000, and became the second Syracuse Defender of the Year after Pat McCabe. Fellow Carthage kid Josh Kaufman, a staple in the Powell's backyard, nearly doubled his scoring tally from the prior year, heralding a wave of underclassmen making the leap. The pieces around Rhino excelled. Cuse only suffered 1 loss all year and entered the postseason with both a bye and the number 1 seed. But that's secondary. When Casey arrived at SU that winter to take his brother home for Christmas break, he found a large number plastered on the wall of Ryan's apartment. Going into his senior year, that number 96 represented the gap between Ryan's 191 career points and Casey's 287. A 96-point season makes a heck of a mountain. Only 2 men in Syracuse history have ever summited it: Tim Nelson and Tom Corey. Gary's 1988 season didn't get there. Maricek never got there. Casey never got within 10 points of it. But let's humor Ryan. With Cuse getting a bye, he'll need to average an even 6 points a game while making the national championship to get to 96. As they're driving home, Casey asks Ryan if they want to stop and grab some beers. Ryan says no. When Casey's friends ask where Ryan is, he'll tell them his brother put mittens on and played wall ball in the snow. After Rhino gets back to Cuse, he turns down parties to practice, and when his teammates take the bus from South Campus in the mornings, they see him running to class instead. Ryan Powell is on a mission. Thanks to a 4-game stretch where he notched all of 30 points, Ryan only dropped below that 6-point-per-game threshold once and ended the regular season with 78. He'd win both the Attacker and Player of the Year awards, but that's not what we're here for. Facing Georgetown for the second time in the first round, Powell's 8 points leave him 5 shy of O'Hara and 10 away from 96. 2 games left, 5 points a game. First up, the first postseason contest in 8 years between SU and Hopkins. Both teams go back and forth all day, but with just over 3 minutes left in a 12-12 game, the Orange go man down. The defensive unit forces an outside shot that goalie Rob Mulligan gets a piece on. Still shorthanded, SU clears the ball to Powell near midfield. 22's gotta make something happen.
Rolling across midfield. Ryan Powell trying to take it in his own hand. Out front to Springer. Springer low, and he's got goal 13 with his own.
Powell's 5th point of the night both ties him with O'Hara at 282 and makes him the 3rd man in SU history to break the 90 barrier in a season. 5 points behind Casey, 1 game left, and you couldn't have asked for a more fitting opponent. Princeton and Syracuse ran college lacrosse in the 90s. One had won the championship in all but 2 seasons, and of course, the Orange made the title game in '99. Make no mistake, Ryan will need to earn every single point. Neither team scores for the first 6.5 minutes of the game, until Ryan jumps into sole possession of second place on the SU career points list. 4 to go. Long Island native Liam Banks spent this Final Four feasting on defenses caught up with Powell. 2 solo goals from him builds up Syracuse's advantage, and on the other end, Abrams gives the Tigers a taste of their own medicine, holding them scoreless for the first 24 minutes of the game. Ryan scores behind the back and assists Banks before the end of the second, and Cuse goes to the break up 7-3. Banks' 4th and 5th goals of the game leave Cuse up 7 midway through the third. Then he hangs up his man at X and scores his 6th, en route to claiming the tournament's Most Outstanding Player award. With the game and the title firmly in SU's grasp as the 4th quarter starts, the story once again turns to Ryan Powell. 15 minutes left, 2 points to go. A rare defensive breakdown gives Powell the space to complete his hat trick. 1 point to go. The clock continues to wind down. Past the 10-minute mark, then 5, then 2, then 1. There was no way Ryan could come all this way just to end up 1 point short. When Ryan Powell was a senior in high school, Carthage's basketball team played a sectional championship at Manly. Down by 1, with 3 seconds left, Ryan steps to the free throw line. The visiting student section continually chants 3 words at him: "You're not Casey." Ryan airballs both shots.
First stadium, it's such a special atmosphere. You gotta get at your scorecard now, folks. No rushing behind. Ryan Powell. Inside, he gets the assist to tie his brother. The only thing down has been answered.
Ryan sprints to the sideline and takes off his helmet. Even if he had a chance to pass Casey, he wouldn't have taken it. Nelson's 103-point year in 1984 remains the program's single-season record, but considering the context, Ryan Powell's 2000 campaign might be the most remarkable season in SU Lacrosse history. While the rest of the team celebrates in a mob at midfield, Casey climbs down to the Syracuse sideline and embraces his little brother. No matter what field, it was always Casey and Ryan, best friends in lacrosse and best friends in life. The duo walked away from Syracuse the only way they knew how to, together. For a brief moment, the cameras catch Casey and Desko chatting on the sideline. I wonder if they couldn't believe it either. For Desko, who toiled under Junior for 19 years to win his first title as head coach against the team that retired his mentor, for it to happen as Ryan Powell matched his older brother in both points and rings on the last goal of the season, Hollywood execs would laugh you out of the room if you pitched that to them. As Ryan enters the stands to enjoy the moment with his family, another changing of the guard begins, as Rhino takes off his number 22 jersey and passes it along, laying down a gauntlet. As impossible as it might have seemed to the fans down in Maryland after the last 12 years, when it came to the encore act of a 5-year Powell party, they had not seen anything yet.